Welcome everyone to another episode of Revolution Recap. Another year, another magical super draft has come and gone with plenty of surprises, confusion, and hot takes about college soccer players most MLS fans heard of for the first time this week. The Revs ended up with a new striker, Edward Kizza, out of the University of Pittsburgh, as well as retaining the MLS rights of Francis Duis, a center back who the Revs have signed to a USL contract prior to the super draft. I'm Greg Johnstone. Joining me today, as usual, is Kris Valukis of Revs Revolt. Kris, how are you doing tonight?
Greg, I'm doing pretty good. I don't know if you've heard, but Tom Brady's back in the Super Bowl. So I'm a pretty big Brady fan. Followed him for many, many years. So I'm pretty happy about that. And then soccer stuff, there's a lot that's happened in the last couple of weeks. So yeah, doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm rooting for Tom Brady too. It's pretty crazy because I got in an argument with someone on Facebook who said that Andrew Luck was a better quarterback than Tom Brady career-wise, and he was very reliant on the New England Patriots system, which apparently can't be duplicated in any sort of way. So as painful as it is to see Tom Brady move on to greener pastures, I think a lot of narratives are being kind of shut down and closed. Kind of the Tom Brady as a system QB narrative is kind of being shut away about as quickly as all those QAnon truthers. So I'm not sure if he's going to be able to get past the Bills or the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, but either way, incredible to see Tom Brady. And Kris, incredible to see another super draft, the most magical time of the year, the MLS Super Draft. The Revs, as I say, drafted Edward Kizza, 24th by the Revs. It was a bit controversial because Josh Bauer out of the University of New Hampshire, who we've mentioned a few times on our podcast before, he trained with Revs too. He was supposed to be one of the top center backs available in the draft, according to all of the pundits. He was almost a top 15 pick last year. He was expected to go in the high first round last year, but he opted to go back to UNH for a senior season, which obviously never happened. He was expected to be a top 10 pick this year, fell all the way down to 31st. The Revs passed on him. They ended up going with Edward Kizza. So, Kris, let's go there first. What are your thoughts about the Revs taking Kizza and passing on Bauer at 24?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was quite shocking that you have this high potential center back sitting there, and center back is a position of need, and then they go in and they take a striker, which wasn't necessarily an area that I was thinking that they might go. I was thinking maybe defensive midfield. They might go for another speedy winger like they've done in years past. And then, Edward Kizza out of Pitt. And also, he's the first ever Pitt player to be drafted in the first round, which kind of blew my mind. Definitely didn't see this one coming. But the more I start thinking about it, I'm starting to wonder, do the Revs have some other plans at center back? Because that roster's starting to look full. They have Colin Verfuth, that is still on the senior roster. Maybe they plan on keeping him. John Bell has recently had his contract negotiated with the MLS. I forget how exactly that all works.
Yeah, I'll catch you up. So the Revs traded for his MLS rights. Whenever you're drafted in the Super Draft, the team acquires your rights for 2 years. So the Revs, he didn't sign with San Jose. He ended up playing at Revs 2 last year and had a fairly successful season, and the Revs traded for his rights. So basically, if the Revs want to sign him to a contract, they can. So John Bell's kind of waiting in the wings. It's unclear if he's going to get an MLS contract, but the Revs could sign him.
Exactly, yeah. And so the fact that they did, obtain his rights again, or for the first time, I guess, it shows that maybe they're looking to bring him up for the future, that he has a future plan. And then they didn't take Josh Bauer here when he was available. When he slid, I mean, he was projected as the second center back to be taken in the draft. I didn't count how many were actually taken before him, but to be taken in the second round was definitely not something I saw coming.
Yeah, and as you say, I think usually 24th pick, you're not going to get a lot of value. I tweeted out before the Super Draft, don't get your hopes up high, because in the last 4 Super Drafts, the combined MLS appearances from the 24th, 51st, and 73rd pick, which is where the Revs were picking, combine those 3 slots over the past 4 Super Drafts, the MLS appearances over all those picks is 0.
That's a fascinating stat to me, by the way.
Yeah, and last year, too, think about this, too. Outside of the top 18 Super Draft picks, 7 players signed MLS contracts. The rest of them went to USL, or they went, elsewhere abroad. They played in other leagues, other lower leagues. Only 7 players outside of the top 18 signed MLS contracts. Not get on the field and make an impact, just signed MLS contracts. So sitting at 24, you're not expecting a whole lot going into this draft. The Revs, to me, seemed like center back was their big hole, because to me, okay, Kessler, Farrell, if that's your center back pairing, fine. If Bruce Arena is happy with that, fine. AJ De La Garza, we talked about him last podcast. He's got really the shape of an outside back. He's 5'9". If Henry Kessler gets hurt, they're putting a lot of faith into Colin Burfirth to step in and kind of replace, because I don't see Andrew Farrell and AJ De La Garza, who are 5'11" and 5'9", being a dominant center back pairing. You'd essentially have 4 outside backs along that back line, and I'm not very optimistic about that. I'm very concerned about center back depth here. So maybe Burfirth is, they value him and they do believe he can fill that kind of 4th center back slot and kind of play back up to Henry Kessler very well. That is very, very possible. But it seems like we're not getting another center back, and that is a bit concerning. And to have Josh Bauer, who we've heard so much about, who the Revs have seen up close because he trained at Revs 2 with them, be available at 24. Something must be wrong with Josh Bauer that the Revs did not take him in that slot, because I could not see a more perfect pick down at 24. I didn't think there was any chance he would be available at 24, and I was hoping maybe the 4th or 5th best center back coming off the board would be there. Josh Bauer not being there and passing on him for a striker is a real head scratcher to me.
Yep, absolutely. And then if we flip it though, and we look at what Edward Kizza brings, I mean, he is going to be, at least at Pitt, he's been a pretty proven goal scorer. And if we look at what the Revs lacked last year, I mean, defense really wasn't an issue. And I know we've lost Michael Mancienne and we've lost Tony De La Mea, but to be honest, they weren't making any impact at all last year. So you need some sort of attacking power, and you might as well take a reach in the draft, I guess. But it is still a bit bizarre that Bauer wasn't taken. But I agree. I'm curious how Bauer pans out. Now he's in Atlanta, and that's, if he turns out to be another solid center back, they're gonna have Bauer and help me out. What's the other center back?
Miles Robinson.
Thank you.
Yeah, but it's interesting because part of me says 25 MLS GMs. I mean, we're excluding Philadelphia and anyone else who's traded out of the first round there, but I mean, 20 plus teams had the option to take Josh Bauer and they didn't. And you get to a point in the draft, I mean, teams were trading up for $50K in allocation money, not a whole lot to trade up. And they were still taking players other than Josh Bauer. So anyone who wanted Josh Bauer could have gotten him for $50K in allocation money. And they just kept passing. So I'm under the impression that something is wrong with Josh Bauer. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's an injury. I don't know if I have no idea. But there is something out there that we're all, everyone outside of Major League Soccer front offices are missing about Josh Bauer. And I'm curious what it is. And I'm curious if he turns into a top 5, super draft player and turns out to be a valuable MLS, starter or contributor, because getting a solid MLS player at 31 in the MLS draft in 2020 is an amazing return for Atlanta United. So just to give you kind of where the pundits had Josh Bauer, MLS.com had him going 4th overall in their mock draft. Matt Doyle had him rated as the 2nd best center back. So SBI had him going 5th overall, and they ranked him 8th on their big board and the 3rd best center back. Top Drawer Soccer had him going 4th overall and ranked him as the 3rd best prospect overall and the best center back in general. So consensus top 5 pick across the board, falling to number 31 in a mechanism that is so top heavy as the Super Draft, where you're only going to get 5 or 6 really good MLS players. That's just a steep drop. So someone's wrong here, whether it's the MLS executives or the pundits, and I'm guessing all the pundits are wrong and everything we've read about Bauer is wrong, but I have no idea why he fell. So,
well, and if we're looking at the pundits too, Ives Garlesep had Edward Kizza as a top 10. He's saying that there's fantastic value here and that he couldn't believe how far Kizza dropped, and he was very excited for the Revolution to make that pick.
I was actually just going to get there because...
Sorry to cut you off.
No. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, and that was a stat that was also thrown out there by a few people on Twitter, that this is still good value. If you look at the MLS draft, he wasn't in the mock draft. They only go through the first round. They didn't have him going in the first round, but Matt Doyle had him ranked as his best center forward. Top Drawer Soccer didn't have him in their mock draft, but they had him ranked as the number 21 best prospect. So there's really no reach there, so to speak. Kris, let's take Josh Bauer out of this equation and let's just look at the value the Revs got overall. What do you grade this pick as? And furthermore, do you have any expectations for Kizza? Because, I don't think a 24th overall pick is, my expectations aren't going to be very high. Do you think there is a role for him on the Revs right away?
Yeah, so we'll start off with the grade, I guess. And I'd have to say, probably a B+. You can't be harsh at picks here. A lot of times it's a lottery pick, and it's you go up to the local convenience store and you just get a quick pick. It's basically what we're doing here with the draft when it gets down to this late round, or the late picks in the round. So Kizza, he was projected in some mock drafts to go pretty high. We got him at 24, and a B+. I think it's a fair grade to give for that. And then because I think there is a spot to go into your next question. I can see him creating space on this roster. I will note that he would take up an international spot if he does get signed. But it sounds like there's only one other signing coming, and I think we have about 2 roster spots available right now. International roster spots, that is. So the numbers work. And then obviously we had problems scoring goals. Love to see competition coming in. Justin Rennicks didn't really have that great of a year when it comes to MLS production. We saw that he's able to put goals in the net down in League One USL, but it hasn't quite translated to MLS goals yet. And maybe Edward Kizza is exactly what we need to challenge Justin Rennicks to be better. Maybe Edward Kizza is going to be a second striker with Buxa, challenging Buxa, maybe making Buxa have to work harder. He is a fox in the box type striker. He's got 31 goals in 53 games at Pitt, which is pretty impressive. Only thing that I'm not sure about is I don't know who their opposition was, so it's hard to rank how good it was, but it's still, those are good numbers. And B+ is my rating, I'd say.
Well, and he was in the ACC. He was a 2-time All-ACC first-team selection. The ACC is no slouch in college soccer, so he certainly has the credentials to be a solid pick, so to speak. And you mentioned his goals. You're right. If you look at his shots and his shots on goals and his conversion percentage, they're all very high. So he is a pure finisher here. I don't know what his role is going to be, because part of me thinks that they might put him at Revs 2 and give him a year down there, so he doesn't cost the Revolution a roster spot on their senior team, and they put him at USL and they kind of give him the role that Justin Rennicks was using last year. See how he can do as kind of a finisher, and as I say, just see him develop for a year before potentially moving him up to the roster next season. He is, when you do draft a player, as I said, you have their MLS rights for 2 years, so there's not necessarily a rush to sign Kizza to an MLS contract, but it is interesting. I even if they sign him to an MLS contract, I'm not sure how many minutes he gets, because they obviously have a lot invested in Buxa. You do have Teal Bunbury there. I guess Teal Bunbury maybe they don't view exactly as a number 9 type of finisher. Maybe they see him more as kind of a winger and whatnot. And they play Justin Rennicks kind of as a winger, as a sub coming off of the bench too. So Bruce Arena in his press conference said that this addressed a need. They needed depth at striker. So maybe they if they do continue 5 subs coming off the bench in 2021, maybe Kizza is a guy that comes off the bench with 10 minutes left. Maybe when you're pressing forward to get a goal, you're pulling off a center back or a defensive midfielder, and you're putting Kizza in the box with Adam Buxa and hoping something works. Maybe he's kind of playing in that role, in kind of a Hail Mary type of role. But overall, I mean, that's kind of my expectations. I don't really see him doing much outside of coming off of the bench. But with that being said, what grade do I give this pick? You said a B+. I'm around there. I think if Josh Bauer was taken 4th overall and we ended up with Edward Kizza, I don't have any complaints about this pick overall. The one thing that scares me is the international roster spot, but they have 2 right now. So if they do sign him to an MLS contract, as I said, they have 1 left over. So you do lose an asset there, but overall I'm not too concerned about it. So We did get a couple of questions because a lot of people are wondering, what does this mean for Justin Rennicks? Revolution Report says, what do you think happens with Rennicks and Kizza? And any Revs UK says, with the potential signing of Kizza, where does this leave Rennicks on the depth charts? I kind of gave my feelings about it a second ago. I think Rennicks is going to be above Kizza on the depth chart, and I think they're going to try to see what they have in Rennicks, because I feel like it's a do or die season for Rennicks at this point, and maybe we see Kizza at USL for a little bit before he gets promoted to the top roster. What do you think, Chris? Where does this draft pick leave Rennicks on the depth chart?
Yeah, I think I'm a bit on the opposite side of the fence here, because I feel like Rennicks has somewhat plateaued as far as his progression has gone. Like I said, last season, USL, he did pretty well, but he really didn't seem to improve much when it came to MLS play. It kind of felt like the same Justin Rennicks that we had in 2019. Kizza, he might be that electric spark that we're looking for. He's got a lot of speed, I think, from the highlight reels that I've watched. He looks very quick, at least, very agile, and he's got he puts a magnet on the ball to find the back of the net. I lost adjectives and similes in that moment, but I think Kizza will be above Justin Rennicks unless he has some unworldly offseason development.
Yeah, and another thing too is I wonder if, as I say, we saw Rennicks kind of play a little bit more out wide. We saw in with Revs 2, he was kind of playing that number 9 role, but the only times he really got in with the Revs, we didn't see him in the number 9 role. He kind of played out wide. So I wonder if he continues to play out wide as kind of a depth winger. But then he's blocked by Teal Bunbury. I don't know. I'm not under the impression Bruce Arena thinks very highly of Justin Rennicks, so I wouldn't be shocked if Kizza moves over him. I just wonder if the international roster spot is a bit of a hurdle, and they want to give Justin Rennicks a try before moving on to Kizza on the depth chart. But it will be interesting to see it unfold. It does seem like a little bit of a duplicate there. And as I say, Bruce Arena did mention that the two areas of need for the team going into the Super Draft was striker and center back. And he feels they addressed both of them, and he stressed that they might make an impact right away. So if you believe Bruce Arena, Kizza might be there on opening day on the bench coming off to play up top. So before we move on, some extra notes from the Super Draft. I think I mispronounced his name in the opening, and I'm probably going to mispronounce it here, but Francois Dulissi. I don't know how to pronounce that. I apologize, but he was drafted 51st by the Revs, as I mentioned. The Revs already had him to a USL contract, so they're essentially just drafting his MLS rights in case they want to promote him. He's a center back, so that's another player to keep an eye on. Maybe we sign him for depth along that back line. As you mentioned, Chris, John Bell also there as a potential 5th center back if the Revs want to go that way. Those guys would fit on the supplemental roster in some way. And then the Revs passed with their 78th pick in the 3rd round. Not a huge surprise there. There's very little value there in the 78th pick, and a lot of people passed in the 3rd round anyway. The Revs did lose 2 players that they signed to USL contracts prior to the draft. Michael DeShields out of Wake Forest, another center back, actually the first center back off the board. He was drafted 5th to DC United. So DC United virtually a guarantee, a lock that they will sign him to an MLS contract, and he is gone. And Sean O'Hearn was drafted in the 2nd round. I have 31st, but I know that was Josh Bauer, so I don't know exactly what pick he went. But he was drafted by Minnesota United in the 2nd round, around there, maybe 33rd or something like that. But Sean O'Hearn was the left back out of Georgetown. So if Minnesota United agrees to deal with him to an MLS contract, O'Hearn will be headed out to the Midwest. If not, O'Hearn will be playing at Revs 2 in the USL next season. So that wraps it up for the Super Draft. Overall, you gave a B+ for the Kizza grade. Overall, is that your grade B+ on the whole for the Revs? I don't want to put too much weight on the 2nd and 3rd round pick, but they certainly did lose some players on Thursday.
Yeah, the Kizza grade also was, if we're taking Bauer out of the equation. If Bauer is in the equation and he was available, like he was, that grade drops for the Kizza signing, because I think that center back was a higher position of need, and I feel like Bauer is a higher potential to make an impact. So I would drop down to like a B- probably. And yeah, I'd stay right around there for the whole draft, B-. They did address defense by signing or drafting Francois Dulis. See, I'll try the name too. I don't know if I did any better. But retaining his rights, when they just signed him as well. So,
yeah, I agree with you. I think that's like a C+ draft for the Revs, because another thing too I want to point out, it's not an either or situation. The Revs could have easily traded up. They could have given $50,000 in allocation money, moved in to the 25th pick or 26th pick, and taken Bauer and taken Kizza. And I feel like those two players, as I say, that back line, I feel like there's a little bit of a hole, and I'm very concerned that there's no Kessler insurance. That seems to be my biggest concern right now. But as I say, I can't be too mad about Kizza, and I don't want to take it out on Kizza because he certainly seems like someone who is more than suitable to be taken 24th overall. So,
but now instead of saying Bauer all the time, we'll have to say Francois Dulis.
Yeah, I mean, just on a pronunciation, I struggle with pronunciation so much, and I apologize to our listeners. I'm phonetically challenged, and Josh Bauer is just so much easier of a name to say than Francois Dulis. So, another name I definitely cannot pronounce.
Arnor Traustason. Nope.
I don't know. Yes, I mean, I don't know. It's good to me. But according to Glenn Crooks, he is close to signing with the Revolution. Icelandic left midfielder, left winger. This one, we haven't heard much out of this rumor from Glenn Crooks on, I think it was Wednesday night, last Wednesday. Bruce mentioned at his press conference that they expect one more signing this offseason. He didn't give position, he didn't give a name, he didn't give a nationality. He just said that they expect one more signing coming up soon. So there's a lot of speculation that this is their next signing, because I feel like left wing is the one big position of need, and if you're going to make a big splash, that is where to do it. So Arnor Traustason certainly seems to fit the bill for what the Revs need. Chris Creighton asks, is this the left midfielder for you? And where do you stand on Icelandic recruits?
Yeah, I guess he would be the left mid for me. There was that Colombian guy that was rumored. I can't remember his name, and he might not have even been Colombian. Definitely South American. And he looked really interesting and really skillful. And I don't remember what league he was playing in either. I can't remember a lot about who he was or what his name was. But that was my first pick. Traustason, I do like the idea of him coming in. He brings a lot of experience, World Cup experience, Champions League experience. Or maybe not Champions League. I can't remember if he was in Champions League. I haven't looked that up, but it was definitely European competitions. And he's going to bring a lot more experience than what we've had at that position before. It's hard for me to actually say what we're actually going to get from him because I don't really know, and it's not even an official signing yet. But where would I stand on Icelandic recruits? I mean, I'm Scandinavian. I'm all for it. Bring them in. The more the merrier. I was rooting for Gabe Somi so hard for too long. So yeah, I need some redemption. Traustason, I'd love to see him come here.
Well, who doesn't love the Icelandic national team? And he brings some international experience. So he's played in the World Cup. He's played in the Euro Cup. And looking at the scouting reports, it's funny. Someone asked for his FIFA ratings, and I looked at him, and I'm like, that looks kind of familiar. And I Googled Christian Panilla's FIFA ratings, and they're basically exactly the same. Panilla's defensive rating wasn't as good, obviously, because he's Christian Panilla, but that's kind of the style of player it seems like we're going to get. He seems very well-rounded, too. He seems like someone who can also play defense and press a little bit. He's fast, not too fast, not Gabriel Somi fast, but certainly a very strong athlete and someone who I don't think you can kind of ignore on the left side, maybe like a Teal Bunbury in the playoffs where we didn't see him make much of an impact. I think that he's going to be able to use the space that defenders give him if they're too busy focusing on Gustavo Bo and Carles Gil. So he's certainly a weapon, and I personally, this seems to be the a type of player that I wanted on the left wing. He won't be a designated player, and he is under contract, so I don't know if there's going to be a transfer fee involved. But if you can bring him on as a TAM signing, which, looking at the numbers here, based on my projections, the Revs have some TAM money to play with. They've not signed Carles Gil to a new contract. They signed Matt Turner, but no TAM is going to be used for that. So they have a lot of TAM money to play with. This fits the bill for what the doctor needed to kind of take this offseason to the next level for me. So, I can't sit here and say I'm an expert too much on this player, but just reading the resume, reading kind of the scouting reports, To me, this is exactly what the Revs need, and I'm very excited. We also got another comment here from Quite Revs on Discord, and he says he wanted some cool Iceland facts. So really quickly here, are you ready, Chris, for some cool Iceland facts?
Let's go. I've been to Iceland, so let's go.
Oh, wow. So I should ask this to you because you probably know more than me, but...
I've only been to the airport, so...
Oh, well, never mind then. Well, I Googled cool Iceland facts, and according to the first Google result, more than 60% of the Icelandic population live in the capital city, Reykjavik. I don't know if that's...
Reykjavik.
I see. I should defer to you for all the pronunciation. Iceland was the last place on Earth to be settled by humans.
That's amusing, yeah.
Many Icelanders believe in elves and trolls.
Oh, okay.
Has this joke played itself out yet? I think 3 is a good enough. We can move on.
Well, you know what's funny about Iceland, too, is I just watched a show, a Netflix show with Zac Efron. I forget the name of it. And it's a documentary. And the first episode of the show is he goes to Iceland. And so I learned a whole lot about Iceland. I watched this about 2 hours ago, and I forget most of it already. But it was a really fascinating show, and I recommend looking up Zac Efron, Netflix, Iceland.
And also on Netflix is that Will Ferrell movie, Fire Saga, or whatever. And they're a pair of, it's him and Rachel McAdams, and they're Icelandic folk singers. And they win the hearts of Europeans by entering a song contest. It's actually not a bad movie. It sounds terrible.
I've been wanting to see that, to be honest.
It's actually very good. And there are a number of songs that actually are pretty decent. I mean, I go to Spotify right now and listen to Volcano Man and thank me later. Anyway, that's enough about Iceland. Back to soccer. It's the off season. What else are we going to talk about? Moving on to another European who is finding his way out of the States. Alexander Buttner and the Revs agreed to a mutual termination of their contract this week. Buttner had 1 year remaining on his deal with the Revolution. Didn't exactly fit in with the Revs, and obviously with Christian Mafla, I know we talked about how it didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to have 2 international spots at that left back spot. So this certainly makes a lot of sense. He also was tied to a few teams in Cyprus. Apol, I cannot pronounce for the life of me tonight, and that kind of fell through. They fired their coach, and it seemed like that fell through. But another team came about in recent weeks, and I'm going to mispronounce this too, but Apollon Limassol? I don't know. They're from Cyprus. But they're rumored to be interested in Buttner. Buttner ended up being released by the Revs and signed by Cyprus. Bruce Arena was asked about it this week by Frank Delapa of the Boston Globe, and Bruce said that Buttner is about to be a father. He wanted to be in Europe, made his life a little bit easier, and the team was willing to go along with that request. So we did get a question from TSB11. Is this clearly Buttner wanted to be back in Europe to be able to see his family during the pandemic? Do you have any info on the sequence of events that led to his release and his signing in Cyprus? Ultimately, I think I don't have any inside information, but I think what's happened here is that the Revs were trying to sell Buttner, and we mentioned this on an earlier podcast a few weeks ago when we talked about Buttner the first time, but his salary was too high, essentially, to sell him. The Revs weren't going to get a transfer fee whatsoever. They essentially were just going to hand him off to whoever would have been willing to take him, because I don't think they were going to get any sort of value back for Buttner, who was on a TAM contract, too. Remember that, too. He's probably the 4th highest paid Rev last season outside of the DPs. So, I'm sure these teams in Cyprus didn't exactly want to pay that high of a salary. So, essentially what the Revs did was, instead of eating a contract, I'm sure they bought him out for a small fee or some sort of fee. They bought out a portion of his contract, and then they just let him negotiate directly with that other team, as opposed to negotiating with the team a fee, who pays for what, portion of the contract, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my guess of how that all happened. And just from the fact that it went from, he was released one day to signed the next, I'm sure a lot of, things just broke down in negotiations, and it was just the easiest way to go. So, Chris, overall, what's your general reaction to the Alexander Buttner move?
Yeah, it kind of felt like it had been coming, right? We've heard rumors, of course, about Apol. Yep. The pronunciations are on point tonight for both of us.
It's brutal. It is brutal. Iceland and Cyprus, man. I mean, geez.
Yeah, it's getting to me. But no, we've been hearing about this for a while now, and with the Mafla signing and everything, writing's kind of been on the wall. We kind of had to expect something along these lines. And then as far as what my reaction is to the on-field product that we're going to be seeing, I mean, I really enjoyed seeing Buttner play. But
did you enjoy seeing Buttner play? Wait a second. Did you enjoy seeing Buttner play? Like the Ben Musket posted an article. The Ben Musket posted an article. Was like remembering Alexander Buttner's best moments. And I was before I clicked on it, I was like, what possibly could this article have? I mean, Buttner had a few good games at the very beginning of the season. He had some injuries towards the end, and then obviously he got COVID before the playoffs. But ultimately, I mean, we went throughout the playoffs without him. I didn't. I wasn't thinking during the playoffs, like, man, if only we had Alexander Buttner in the playoffs. He was a fine little player, but for a TAM left back, I don't think he made much of an impact at all.
Yeah, I will say for the value of what we did not get, a return on investment, I would say, on Alexander Buttner. You want to go that route? I 100% will go and agree with you on that. But taking money out of the equation, seeing him on the field, he seemed like a tidy player for the most part. He was really good at crossing the ball. Obviously, I feel like he got a bit of a tough shake when it comes to nobody was being able to finish anything. Nobody was in the box when he was crossing it. Maybe that's on him for crossing it when no one's making the runs, but he put in a lot of crosses, and he took a lot of the corner kicks as well, which I have to say were very well taken for the majority of the time. And the effort, I'm a big effort guy. That's why I supported Teal Bunbury so hard for so long. He always seems to put in a lot of effort, and he advances the ball upfield. And we've also went from Gabe Somi to Alexander Buttner, so or Claude Dielna. I mean,
and Edgar Castillo,
Kellen Rowe. So it was a big upgrade, and I definitely enjoyed watching him play. I was I was close to buying a Buttner jersey myself, so I did enjoy him.
Yeah, I agree with you that if you look at it from a return on investment standpoint, I don't see how you can view him as anything but a bust. In terms of a TAM signing, it was a big name. I say big name, but it's a, obviously he had a very big resume that certainly seemed impressive coming in. I think I expected him to make more of an impact than he did. And I don't know, I don't want to hammer him too heavily, because as you say, I can't point to many examples of him being terrible, and that left back spot has been so bad. He did solidify it, so I part of me is like, he stabilized an area that's been an real pain for all of us, in New England for years, between Somi and Edgar Castillo, and who else? Claude Dielna. I mean, it's been a real pain. So
I forgot about Edgar Castillo, by the way.
I still say that, he really was a victim of terrible coaching under Brad Friedel than anything else, and having him push up and whatnot. But that's besides the point. He still, I think, underperformed from what people expected. But with that being said, he was a third of probably what, Alexander Buttner was as a TAM signing. So I don't know. It comes and goes. And Buttner, as you mentioned, his set piece crossing, to me, the biggest thing we'll lose is his set pieces. I'm not sure who, outside of Carles Heel, who is delivering set pieces for the Revs right now, because you had Buttner, you had Wynn. I think Kellen Rowe took a few last season. So outside of Carles Heel, who's delivering corner kicks? Maybe Mafla can deliver some set pieces. But overall, I think that's where we're going to miss him the most. But as we've mentioned on previous podcasts, Mafla seems good enough to be a starting left back, and with the investment that they are, bringing him in at as an international roster spot, he's 27 years old. Buttner was, on the wrong side of 30. He's 33. He takes up an international roster spot. It's a 2-year deal. I couldn't see the Revs signing him beyond 2021. So I think that this is just getting ahead of letting go of him a year early. They're letting him go back and be a father in Europe. I don't want to label him as a bust, but I think you put it very well that he did not return the Revolution's investment into him. And it was a bit of an overpay overall on Alexander Buttner in his tenure in New England. Moving on to some other news, Matt Turner received a contract extension. He signed a deal in the summer of 2019. Yes, applause. He signed a contract extension back in the summer of 2019. It was a 4-year extension. It began this year. It ran through 2023. Julian Cardillo reported previously it was $200,000 annually with bonus potential. So the Revs giving him another contract is a little out of the blue because he had 3 more years of team control. But he said in a press conference that the extension comes with a raise and also comes with a 1-year extension through 2024. So, Chris, assuming that a large raise is included and maybe he goes from $200,000 to, say, $400,000 and he's now suddenly paid among the top in the league, do you think this was a good decision by the Revs, or do you believe the Revs should have held Matt Turner on a team-friendly deal and keep him at that $200,000 rate?
Were they going to use that money somewhere else? I mean, I don't know. I think that's a fantastic decision. Goalkeeper is one position that you really need to shore up. Having a revolving door there is just not going to be good. You know, your goalkeeper, let's not forget, your whole back line is commanded by your goalkeeper. And if you're going to keep changing who your commander is, you're just going to cause problems. So once you get that one solid piece in there, you could start building out your back line and really create some chemistry. And it seems like they might have actually done that. At least as far as last year has gone. So Matt Turner getting an extension, fantastic for 1 more year. Getting the raise, great for him. You know, he totally deserves it. Obviously, he's now with the U.S. men's national team. Looks like he's going to get his first cap on the 31st. So in a week, I think, from the date that we're recording this. And yeah, I'm happy for him. I think it should have happened, and it shows that the Revs are not necessarily looking to shop him like everyone has been saying.
I was going to say, I think the biggest thing out of this, well, first off, in terms of the money, you're right. Are the Revs going to be using every single dollar this offseason? The answer is no. And so just the fact that you get to tack on another year of his contract, one, that kind of boosts up the price a little bit for any team looking in Europe, because it's certainly harder to buy a player that has 4 years left on his contract than one with 3. Maybe not by a ton, but it solidifies him here a little bit longer. 2, it shows the Revs are committed to him and they're not looking to sell him, which I think a lot of speculation was looking at. So I think it tells Matt Turner, we want you here as long as you want to be here. And I think Matt Turner feels very relieved that his future is not necessarily up in the air. He's not shy about saying that he wants to play in Europe at some point and he wants to test himself. But he certainly likes it in New England, to the point where he got annoyed at some questions about the European interest last year. And he certainly loves being with the Revolution. So I think from both sides, it's a bit of a relief to, as you say, solidify that goalkeeper position and know you've got one of the best in the league for the next 4 years if you want. So, yeah, I agree with everything you said there. Not much more to say. Just even if you have to double his salary, it's still a pretty good value, and you're tacking on 1 more year to that contract. That's going to run him through. He turns 27 this June, so that'll run him through age 31. So you're going to have him for his prime a little bit. So yeah, agree with that. And also rumors that a Carles Gil contract extension is incoming, which I think is a top priority for the Revolution. He had an option year this year, and when he signed, there was some reports out of Spain that he signed a 2-year contract with 2 team options. So he might be under contract next year as well. But for the same reason that you want to keep Matt Turner happy, I think you want to keep Carles Gil happy. And since he's a designated player, you don't have to worry about money too much. You don't have to worry about fitting him within the cap. So hopefully the Revs, if they are signing Carles Gil, I've heard rumors. I think Chris Creighton says he's heard a rumor about a new 3-year contract with a team option in the 4th year. So that's something to keep an eye out for, but as of right now, hasn't been finalized. And as I say, I don't have any inside knowledge on that one, but keep an eye out for another contract extension coming in the next few weeks. So
yeah, I'm honestly surprised that we haven't heard anything about an extension officially from this standpoint yet, because you think just over 2 weeks ago, we were recording another podcast. This one was the interview with Matt Polster, which, by the way, if you haven't given a listen to, I suggest go listening to it. It was really fun getting to chat to him. But I digress on that comment, and back into the Carles Gil. It's been over 2 weeks. That tweet has been sent out with just a picture of what appears to be Carles Gil. Did it mean nothing? It's such a mystery tweet, and it's probably the biggest unknown right now in Revs offseason is what does that tweet mean?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to speculate and just do baseless speculation, which is what this podcast does best, I would say that they thought a Gil extension was being finalized, and maybe there's been a bump in the road. I don't know. It also might just be whoever is running the account just trolling everyone. There was some speculation it had to do with the New Jersey release and the away jersey release because it was the current Revs away jersey. So maybe it had something to do with that. But it has been a few weeks and it's been very quiet and there hasn't really been any answers on that. So I think it's just keeping everyone on pins and needles. And it might be a situation where they are waiting for the right moment to announce a heel extension if it is being in the works. But as I say, it hasn't been finalized yet. And that tweet is a little mysterious and it's been a few weeks. So I'm not sure what's going on there. And the fact that we've had a second podcast released since that jersey tweet got sent out is, that just shows you how long it's been, because it's been a full 2 weeks since our last podcast. So, yeah, head scratcher on that one.
Yep.
We got some general questions here. You ready, Chris?
I'm good. Let's go, yeah.
Okay, so first off, Revolution Report says, if, as Bruce says, one more player is coming in, and we are assuming it is our Icelandic friend over there on the left wing, are you happy with the squad? What else would you like to see? Center back depth, backup, creative mid. So, Chris, overall, are you happy with the squad? And if not, what do you want to see them improve?
Yeah, I guess overall I'd be somewhat happy with it, assuming Traustason is in there. I'd be excited. Not knowing if it's not Traustason or if it's someone else, my excitement level might not be quite there. Center back depth, of course, is a big concern. We talked about that quite a bit at the beginning of the podcast, and there's not a lot going on. And if we're depending on De La Garza, Verfuth, and possibly John Bell, that worries me a bit. And the backup creative mid, I guess Kaptoum is probably going to be that guy, so maybe Heel and Kaptoum can feed off of each other. Do we have a third creative midfielder? No, not that I could think of. Do you need one? I'm not sure if you do. But overall, I guess I'm happy, maybe a bit underwhelmed so far. But with the Traustason signing, that would probably meet my expectations. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with everything you said. I've talked about the center back depth earlier, where, if our starting center backs are set, okay. If we think De La Garza and Verfuth are a third and fourth center back that we don't need to use that much, okay. But I worry if we have enough Kessler insurance. If he goes down, what's the plan back there? Is it De La Garza or is it Verfuth back there? And I'm not sure I have a lot of confidence in either one. And I hope that Verfuth is a diamond in the rough that Bruce Arena has a lot of faith in. That'll certainly make me feel a little bit better. In terms of a creative midfielder, I feel like Kaptoum could fill that role. And I certainly think that a season where you missed Carles Heel and you were a totally different team without him on the field, they have a plan B, and I assume Kaptoum is that plan B. I can't imagine that they force Gustavo Bo back into that role, where he kind of struggled a little bit. They kind of had a revolving door. I'm not totally certain what the plan is. I feel like Kaptoum might be the answer there, and he can play that role if need be. So I'm not as concerned there. Really, center back depth is my only real issue. And if Henry Kessler is healthy, if you tell me today that Henry Kessler plays every game or he misses one game, I'm really happy with the squad. So overall, I think the big shoe to drop is that left wing. And if we bring in Traustason, again, apologies if I cannot pronounce words for my life, so I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. But if we bring him in, I'm more than happy with it. So Christian Matthews says, set pieces seem to be a huge weakness for us in 2020. Did we do enough with players to improve here? I'll start with you, Chris, on how you want to handle this one.
I'd say no. So I think set piece delivery was fine, as I mentioned before, with Buttner. And, assuming Traustason is the one that comes in, I think, if I'm remembering on my highlight watching correctly, he does do set pieces. So maybe he could still handle delivering that. And Carles Heel is, he's got a fantastic left foot. But I think the big weakness is height. We lack a lot of height on this team. And it's when you're putting in a set piece, you need somebody that's going to be an aerial threat to get up there. Adam Books is the only real one, and none of the crosses ever seem to really find him, or he never seems to find it. I'm not sure which one it is there. But yeah, I don't think that they've really done enough or done anything with a focus on set pieces.
Yeah, and defensively, I'm not totally sure. The one thing I've noticed over the past season or so is they used Adam Books a lot on defensive set pieces, and that makes me, he certainly wins the ball in the air a lot. So I'm not too worried about the defensive side, because I feel like on set pieces, we actually were a little bit better than we were in previous seasons. so to speak. And I think Adam Buksa was pretty solid in the air. I also think Brandon Bai adds a lot in the air as a right back. He's 6 feet tall. I think at one point, I don't know if he ended the season as the leader of this stat, but they had some sort of stat that they flashed on the screen where he leads the league in aerial duels or something like that. So defensively, I feel perfectly fine. The one question I do have is that service, and maybe Traustason is a set piece player. I'm Googling his Football Manager rating stats because I'm not totally sure. He's got a 13 crossing, an 11 free kick taking ability. So he seems like a decent option as a free kick taker. And if you give me a second, let me see what Alexander Buttner was. I'm sure he's in that 12 to 13 range too. He was 14 at free kick taking, 15 at crossing. So you downgrade a little bit now there.
According to Football Manager.
According to Football Manager. That is my 2-second analysis of something that I didn't think about until we started recording. So yeah, where's that service coming from? Is it Carles Gil? Are we completely relying on Carles Gil? Maybe that's the answer. And again, if Carles Gil is healthy, 33 games, I'm not worried one bit. It's if Carles Gil goes down, who's taking corners? Who's serving up those free kicks? Because Adam Buksa, a lot of his game is headers and directing in headers. And if he doesn't have good service, he's a bit neutralized. So I'm not totally sure we did enough this offseason to improve that aspect of our game. So David Sibilian and a casual fan ask us, are the Revs better on paper than they were at this point last year? And then on top of that, are the Revs better on paper last year compared to the competition? And so and he also means, are they better on paper compared to where they were last year on paper? So like, do you have higher or lower expectations going into last season? So let's start with, the Revs on paper this year versus last year. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, starting from the beginning of the season, I'd say right now it looks better, but that's a lot because we know what Henry Kessler is. Coming into last year, we thought that it's going to be Tony DeLamea and Andrew Farrell, or possibly Michael Mancey, and we didn't think that Henry Kessler was going to come in and make this impact. So having that is just an instant upgrade. Left back is a bit more of a question mark, but it was a question mark last year as well, so can't really take away or add any points there. And otherwise, we still have a lot of the same roster throughout. We know a lot more of what Tejan Buchanan can bring, and then we've seen how Gustavo Bo can go down and come right back up. We still kind of expect the same thing from him. And Adam Buksa, I guess, was the other unknown from last year. We know a bit more now that he obviously had a really, really dry spell there for, I think, 12 or 13 games. He didn't score a goal. And then once he started getting it going, he seemed to be doing much better and producing and, doing really well at playing that hold-up role. So I think it has to be higher right now. The only thing I'd say is, maybe Kessler's expectations coming into this year will be lower. Buksa, I keep going back and forth. Buksa's expectations are going to be lower this year. I think people expected much more from him last year than what he was able to produce. But I still think he had a solid year, and he should still, have high expectations overall. If we add any other pieces, who knows what Captoon can bring. We have Polster now playing defensive midfield. I think that's an upgrade over Zahibo. And Caicedo's coming back. I'd say 100% better and higher expectations.
I will say the only two areas that I feel are weaker on paper, so to speak, and you kind of touched on this, is Adam Buksa. I think last year we thought was going to come in and be a 15 goal scorer. He was going to come in and he was going to light it up. And that didn't exactly happen. I still have some faith in Buksa. I know you do. But I think the expectations are really tampered down for him, where, if he scored 10 goals this season, we'd be fine with it. Whereas I think if he scored 10 goals, if he had a normal season with no COVID and we went into 2020, he scored 10 goals, I think that we would have been let down a little bit. So I think expectations for Buksa are down a little bit. I also think Bo came into the league and he had such a phenomenal 2019. I think we his expectations were kind of to the moon. Whereas I think now we know there are going to be some games where he's going to be off and things just don't work out for him. I don't remember what. I think he was on like a 22 goal scoring pace over a season in 2019. I mean, he scored almost every game, it seemed like, in 2019, where it was almost an expectation for Bo to find a way to score.
He brought us to the playoffs 2019 himself, so yeah.
So I think that is a major difference too, where on paper, Gustavo Bo this year isn't as dynamic and the expectations aren't as high for him as compared to last year. With that said, if you take those two players out, everyone else on the team, as you said, has higher expectations or the same expectations. And as you said, Tayon Buchanan, a lot of people have him starting at right back. He's with the Canadian national team. No one saw that last year. Henry Kessler is with the United States men's national team, and he didn't make the roster for Trinidad and Tobago, but he's still in camp, and he's a potential U.S. men's national team. No one saw that. People were wondering if he'd even start or if he was going to be Revs 2 or whatever. Matt Turner had another phenomenal season. I don't think things have changed from Revs perspectives in terms of Matt Turner, but he's obviously boosted his stock a little bit this year as well. So there's really no player outside of Bo and Buxa that I think on paper we have lower expectations for than we did last season. So I don't. It's kind of weird to say that we're not really satisfied with the team and all that, and saying that the supporting cast around the designated players have all, our expectations have risen. But it's kind of true that I think on paper, it's a little bit stronger overall compared to 2020. It's just not as top heavy as we all thought, where we thought the three designated players were going to light up the scoreboards and hopefully carry our defense and win enough shootouts. I think it's more of a well-balanced team compared to last year. Second part of that question here too, where do we stand compared to the competition on paper compared to the competitions? Like, for example, our projected, where do we finish in the East? Do you project them to do better this year in MLS than what we projected last year?
Yes. I think, my expectations are personally much higher for Eastern Conference tables. I'm thinking top 4, maybe 5th, because you got to think Atlanta United is probably going to be back in the mix again. But yeah, if they can finish top 4, that would meet my expectations. Whereas last year I said they're going to be a playoff team, maybe 6th or 5th if they're lucky. So yeah, they're definitely better this year as opposed to last year when it comes to their roster versus the competition. It's hard to rate it if we're going to rate on paper against the competition without judging from year to year. So, that's where I'm going with that.
I think our expectations were a little bit higher than yours. I think we were around a top 4 team last year. So I think we're about the same too. The one thing I'll say is I'm not sure which teams got better in this offseason. I guess Miami you can expect a lot more from this season. Columbus got a lot better, but they're already above us, kind of on the food chain, so to speak. So I think I expected a lot of teams to really go out and do a whole lot more. And I'm not sure really a lot of Eastern Conference teams scare me this year. So I'm kind of at the same spot I was last year in terms of, the Revs could win the East. Are they going to, win the Supporter Shield? Probably not. Are they going to be the number 1 seed? Probably not. But, I could see them being a number 3 team or a number 2 team if they stay healthy and if all goes right. So, and I'm pretty sure that's where I was last year. If you're asking me where do they finish in the East, I got a really solid bet on 3rd place.
Yep, I'd be happy with that. And you think, 2 of the top Eastern Conference teams in Toronto FC and Philadelphia, they've lost some key pieces. Philadelphia losing Aronson and Mark McKenzie. I don't know if he's still with them or not, but
yeah, McKenzie's gone.
He's gone.
Yeah, and TFC hired Chris Armas, so they're going to be trash this year. We did get one more question here from TSB11. Any updates on potential green cards? For those of you that don't live on Twitter and don't scroll for news as often as me and Chris do, there's a rumor, or I think it was a report, I think it was reported by someone, that Luis Caicedo is close to getting a green card, which would mean he no longer takes up an international roster spot. That would be pretty big for the Revs. As I said, coming into today, before signing Kizza, they have 2 international roster spots, so that would give them 3. If they sign Kizza, they move back down to 2. But overall, that's still a very valuable asset for the Revs that even if they don't use, they could end up trading and getting some allocation money back. I do not have any inside information, though, on if that is coming or if there's anyone else coming down the pipeline for potential green cards. And I'm guessing that we won't know until rosters are released. just because usually that's how we find out about green cards. I know Tony Delamea, I don't think that was reported. I think the rosters were released and people pointed out that he did not take an international roster spot, and the Revolution front office clarified that he no longer takes one because he has a green card. I can't remember the last time someone broke news of someone having a green card similar to the Caicedo news. So no updates on our end about potential green cards. Other news for just kind of clearing out the recent news. Shalry Joseph is up for the U.S. National Soccer Hall of Fame. Hopefully, I mean, to me, seems like a no-brainer. I don't think that is a thought that is limited to people in New England. I feel like Shalry Joseph should be an easy lock for the National Hall of Fame, but you also would have thought he would have been a lock for the best 25 in MLS, and that turned out to be, yeah. So, friend of the program, Shalry Joseph, former guest. I shouldn't say former guest, but he is a guest. If you have not listened to that episode, please go back in our timeline and scroll back. Also, Shalry Joseph's former position as a Grenada head coach was filled this week, I think, by like a Canadian assistant coach, the assistant coach from the Canadian national team. So that position sat like vacant for like 8 months. Anyway, moving on. If you did not hear, there were a couple of other good interviews besides our Matt Polster interview, which, again, you should go back to and listen to if you haven't heard it yet. But the Yellow Card podcast had an interview with AJ De La Garza, and New England Soccer Weekly had an interview with Scott Caldwell. So if you haven't listened to those, please go back, give those a look. I think they're 2 weeks old at this point, but if you missed them, please go back. Julian Cardillo had some information that Tony Delamea, former Rev, is garnering interest from other MLS clubs and also some interest in Europe. The Revolution are not among them. So if you are a Delamea stan, do not hold your breath. It seems like he is not coming back. And that's one, too, that I think is pretty significant because Bruce Arena talked about bringing back certain players. He mentioned they expected to sign, I think he said like 4 or 5 players, and they ended up only signing McNamara. I think Delamea was the one that, me and Sean at least were expecting might come back, considering the lack of center back depth there. Also, Kellen Rowe has signed in Seattle. That was a long time coming. And Kakuta Mene has signed in Austin. So he is joining up with Diego Fagundes down with the expansion side. And then the other thing, too, I wanted to mention right before we ended this podcast was kind of a roster update. It was pointed out to me, because we've been talking a lot about goalkeepers taking up 3 senior roster spots. And I don't want to get into how the rule is written, but basically for the and for those, I'll kind of walk it back to. I'll give the basic explanation of the MLS roster for the Revolution is 30 spots. The top 20 are senior roster spots. The bottom 10 are supplemental roster spots, and then the supplemental roster is divided into 3 parts with specific rules for each parts. So the top 4 spots are 21 through 24. I misread a rule there. And basically, if you sign for the league minimum, you can go on to the 21 through 24 spots. The reason I kind of missed that is because it says league minimum, and that includes homegrown players or SuperDraft picks or something like that. And so I thought it was limited to homegrown players, but it actually is. You don't need to be a homegrown player. So Earl Edward Jr., in theory, is on the 21 through 24 spots. And in theory, he does not need to take up a senior roster spot. So I just wanted to clarify that. From previous podcasts, we've mentioned that the Revs have 3 goalkeepers on their senior roster. That is not necessarily true. If Earl Edwards Jr. signed for the league minimum, he can be put on the supplemental roster. And also, it was also pointed out to me that Scott Caldwell does fit on the 25th through 28th spots, and Colin Verfuth is turning 25 this year. So if you are on the 25 through 30 slots, you have to be 24 or under. And Verfuth is going to have to move to 21 through 24, and Scott Caldwell is going to have to go down to the 25 through 28 because of a homegrown exemption. Again, I don't know if there's any way I can explain this, but to be on the 25 through 30th, you either have to be under the age of 24 or you have to be a homegrown player that, oh boy,
Yeah, the only thing more confusing than Greg explaining his day job is MLS roster rules.
Don't make me explain my day job. That I would never. I will subject the listeners to more Iceland facts before we get to what I do for a living. But yeah, 25 through 28, the rules are may include players earning reserve minimum salary, which is lower than the senior league salary. So you have to be earning the minimum salary, or you're a homegrown player who earns more than the reserve minimum salary that is subject to the homegrown subsidy. And basically, I've looked into this. Scott Caldwell fits that bill. So Scott Caldwell is on the 25 through 28 roster. Verfuth, Buchanan, Kessler, and Earl Edwards are on the 21 through 24 roster, assuming Earl Edwards is making the minimum salary for the senior roster. So hopefully that clarifies everything. I really don't want to explain it. It's really complicated. It's really stupid. And I'm sure I'm missing something else, and that's the worst part. The rosters are going to come out, and I'm sure something else is going to come out that I didn't know before. So it's all terrible. It's all stupid. Just know that the Revs have, as of right now, 4 senior roster spots open, and they have 2 international roster spots open, not including Edward Kizza, who would take one of those spots. And it does not include Traustason.
Francis.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say Francois Dulis.
No.
He's on USO.
Kizza and Dulis would take the 25 through 28 roster spots. So there's room for them. But Traustason would take a senior roster spot. So assuming that signing is coming, the Revs should go into the season with 3 senior roster spots. And if Kizza is signed, they will have 1 international roster spot. Unless Caicedo gets a green card, then they have 2 international roster spots.
Traustason would take an international spot too, though.
Damn it. So the Revs would have
0 international spots and 3 senior roster spots.
Chris has me covered.
Math on Revolution Recap.
Chris, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts, and where can people follow you on social media?
Look, pronunciations and MLS rules aside, we got through this one and we did a great job. My final thoughts, it's the off season. I have a frozen pizza that's waiting for me. That's pretty much my final thoughts right now. And find me, I'm always on Twitter. I'm pretty active over there. You can find me at Kris Valukis or at Revs Revolt. And I'm also on Instagram, Twitch, and I'll tell you all that on Twitter, though. So come find me over there.
I got it. For the people not on Twitter, though, I mean, Revs Revolt YouTube. What's your Twitch handle?
My Twitch, everything's Revs Revolt. Outside of my personal Twitter of Kris Valukis, everything is /Revs Revolt. I think I'm on pretty much every platform, including TikTok, even though I've never even used it.
Yeah, you're more tech savvy than us. We're just on Facebook and Twitter, and you can follow us at Revolution Recap on Twitter, and also like our Revolution Recap Facebook page. You can also send us an email or a note, revolutionrecap@gmail.com, at any time with your questions or comments or requests. We're open to anything if you have a comment for our show. And if you have not already, please rate and review our podcast on iTunes or wherever you're listening. Haven't gotten a review in a while. I think we're at 56 reviews. And you know what, Chris? I like doing that interview a few weeks ago. Maybe we'll do another interview if we get to, say, 60 reviews. If we get to 60 reviews, maybe we'll do another interview. How about that?
Sounds fair.
But also, Chris, I'm just looking at this right now. It's, as of this recording, 31-15 Chiefs. Looks like Chiefs Bucks in the Super Bowl. We might not have a podcast before then. So give me your pick: Chiefs or Tom Brady.
Do I go with my heart or do I go with my brain?
You go with the right choice.
Tom Brady is going to win it and prove all the haters wrong. And because Chiefs don't even have Patrick Mahomes, right? Maybe he'll be back by then.
No, he's back. He's very back. He's thrown for 320 yards. He's very back right now.
Okay, I haven't been watching because we've been on.
Yeah, it's 37-15 right now. I have the Chiefs winning by 10. But anyway,
you'll take Chiefs by 10 in the Super Bowl, right? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'll take Bucks by 3 then.
Thank you everyone for listening. This was off-season episodes kind of get off the rails a little bit, and Sean's not here to supervise us, so apologize if we rambled on a little bit longer. But again, follow us at Revolution Recap on Twitter, Revolution Recap Facebook page, revolutionrecap@gmail.com. And not sure when our next episode is coming out, but until then, thank you everyone for listening, and go Revs.